November 1776. The state of the American Revolution is bleak. Having been trounced in the battles of Long Island, Kip's Bay, and White Plains, the Americans have abandoned New York altogether. General George Washington's force has eroded as soldiers desert in droves and men are captured, wounded, or killed. As it is, Washington struggles to instill discipline into inexperienced soldiers accustomed to, indeed fighting for, individual freedom. Overwhelmed by vastly greater numbers at Fort Washington, over 2,800 Americans are taken prisoner. Hundreds of these will die of disease in British Army prisons. In the aftermath of the battle, the Americans abandon Fort Lee across the river. Having thus secured the Hudson, British General Charles Cornwallis chases Washington's dwindling army southward across New Jersey. In full flight, the Americans elude battle in Newark and New Brunswick. American morale is low, and loyalists have been emboldened by the string of rebel defeats. The British are optimistic the war will be won before the end of the next year. To many on both sides of the Atlantic, it has already been won. Even with the arrival of an additional 1,000 troops led by General William Alexander, also known as Lord Stirling, Washington's army, once 20,000, has dwindled to less than 5,000. Worse still, on December 1st, the enlistments of 2,000 soldiers expire, and there is no light at the end of this tunnel. On New Year's Day, all enlistments are said to expire. Already, Washington has ordered General Charles Lee to join him from North Castle, and General Horatio Gates to join him from Ticonderoga. Both of these men believe themselves more suited than Washington to be commander-in-chief. More to the point, neither has arrived with reinforcements. Desperate for more men, Washington sends Quartermaster General Thomas Mifflin to plead with Congress to send more troops. After pausing briefly at New Brunswick, the British press on toward the Americans at Trenton. Washington retreats again, this time across the Delaware River into Pennsylvania. On the New Jersey side of the river, every boat in the vicinity not used in the escape is destroyed. In Pennsylvania, they are met by 1,000 militia from Philadelphia, the fruit of Quartermaster General Mifflin's journey. Alas, before long, more bad news arrives. General Lee is captured at a tavern in Basking Ridge, New Jersey, where he had been writing a letter to Horatio Gates disparaging George Washington. The very same day, Congress abandons Philadelphia. As it happens, they needn't have bothered. On December 14th, Howe calls an end to the year's campaign. He and most of his men return to New York City, leaving Hessian mercenaries guarding the Delaware River from Trenton to Burlington, opposite the Americans. Finally, on December 20th, Charles Lee's troops, now under the command of General John Sullivan, arrive to join Washington. Unfortunately, they are only 2,000 strong, half of what Washington had expected, and they are in such need of shoes that by some accounts they have left bloody tracks in the snow. General Gates and his men arrive later that same day, but his men number only 600. On the 23rd, Washington orders Thomas Paine's pamphlet, The American Crisis, read before his dispirited troops. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered, yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. With public support for the revolution waning, Washington knows he must give the American people a reason to carry on the fight. As it is, thousands have joined British camps to pledge their loyalty to King George III. Even so, Washington's next move is decisive, bold, and more than a little risky. On Christmas Eve, he orders his boats brought to a Delaware crossing known as McKonkey's Ferry, 9 miles upstream from Trenton. The next evening, even as the mercenaries under Colonel Johann Rall celebrate Christmas across the river, 2,400 Americans assemble quietly at the bank of the river. The Delaware is frigid. Chunks of ice float downstream. The weather only worsens as the soldiers cross. It drizzles, then rains, then snows. The men are not across until 3 a.m., too late for the pre-dawn assault Washington had planned. The troops split into two columns, one to attack Trenton from the north by the Pennington Road, led by Washington and General Nathaniel Greene, and one to attack from the west by the River Road, led by General John Sullivan. The two columns arrive in Trenton shortly before 8 o'clock on the morning of the 26th. The Hessians are caught utterly off guard. Before long, a young artillery captain named Alexander Hamilton has set up on King Street, while another, Thomas Forrest, sets up on Queen Street. The cannonade makes it impossible for the Hessians to form defenses. In less than an hour, Trenton is in American hands. Colonel Rall is among 22 Hessians killed in the fight. The Americans capture some 1,000 prisoners, with no loss of life among their own beyond 2 men frozen to death during the night. Moreover, they captured much-needed food, clothes, and ammunition. And more still might have been won, but for the failure of 2 planned American crossings below Trenton, led by Generals John Cadwalader and James Ewing, both of whom are hampered by the frozen river. With half of his army still on the other side of the Delaware, Washington aborts plans to march on to Princeton and instead pulls back to Pennsylvania. Over the next few days, the Hessians abandon every post along the Delaware. Washington offers bounties to his soldiers to stay for 6 weeks beyond the upcoming expiration of their enlistments. Most agree to stay. In Trenton, on January 2nd, Washington evades Cornwallis's reawakened force, once again slipping away in the dead of night. The next morning, he wins yet another surprise engagement in Princeton before retiring to winter quarters in Morristown. News of Washington's victories spread quickly throughout the newborn nation. The battles are small, but the Americans and their hope for independence have survived to fight another day. And that would prove to be no small thing at all.